This week on Women Who Rise, I'm joined by Sam Goldfinch, clarity coach, spiritual rebel, and co-host of the Present and Sober podcast. We're talking about the kind of rebellion that doesn't make noise, it makes change. Sam shares how sobriety, stillness, and self-trust can become your superpowers in leadership, in business, and in life. If you've ever felt like the rules weren't made for you, this episode will help you rewrite the script. Welcome, everyone, to Women Who Rise. I'm your host, Heather Mansy. Today's guest is Sam Goldfinch, a clarity coach, spiritual rebel, and co-host of the Present and Sober podcast. As the founder of Rebel Spirituality and a senior coach with This Naked Mind, Sam's mission is to help people reconnect with their inner wisdom, break free from conditioning, and live with purpose, without the fluff or forced rules of traditional self-help. He's known for his raw, practical approach to transformation, whether he's guiding someone through sobriety or helping leaders navigate complexity with clarity. Through his talks, coaching, and podcast, Sam empowers others to rebel in the most meaningful way by remembering who they truly are. I am so honored to have Sam on this show today. Welcome.
Thanks, Heather. It is. I think that might be the coolest intro that I've ever had. So the first thing I need to do is say thanks for that. That was badass. I love it.
I'm so glad. You deserve of nothing less. So just full disclosure, I have known you for years now. And, when I was struggling with several things in my own life, including the recent passing of my mom, and just overwhelmed with business stress and other things, I was lucky enough to find you as a coach and engaged in over a year and a half of regular coaching. And it literally put just jetpacks on everything I needed. And it also gave me what I really was seeking at the time also, which was, better ways to deal with stress, better ways to deal with sorrow, better ways to, be able to recover from passing of such a significant loved one as my mom. And I just gained so much more. We started just literally designing my life and all of that. So it was so important to me to bring you on this episode. And I'm so grateful because we're about women being able to transform themselves, being able to rise, being able to go above, shoot above, maybe their own expectations or society's expectations of them, or even the expectation their current boss may have of them. And so there's so many things that can kind of hamstring us. And I know we'll talk a bit about that. And also things that can, ways that we can find in ourselves, that inner wisdom to go higher. So I want to first start by just talking a little bit about, you have a term, spiritual rebel. Can you define, what that means to you?
Yeah. Well, before we go there, I just want to say how touched I am to hear you say that, Heather, because ultimately that's why I do what I do. And, to hear that and to hear where it's coming from is very meaningful to me. So thank you for sharing that. I know you've shared that with me before, but it's really lovely to hear that. And particularly in, with lots of people listening as well, it means the world that you'd say that. So yeah, great. Right.
So
Spiritual rebel.
It's so true. Yeah. I definitely count you as one of the top, couple of people in my life that have allowed me to impact myself in a positive way because of your teaching and guidance. And this is, I think, honestly, you're probably the most meaningful coach other than, directional business type coaching that a person can have. And yes, I regard you just as the pinnacle of that kind of an industry of personal coaching, wellness coaching, sobriety coaching, anything like that. And I know I'm not the only one who feels this way. I am friended with other students of yours, and we think of you highly as utterly brilliant, right? I told you before we got on this show. All right. So what does, because I can fangirl you for like an hour.
No, yeah, let's move on. Let's go.
Yeah. So what does spiritual rebel mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny. I was when your team sent over an email with a few things to kind of for me to write down and think about. There was a question in there about kind of what's something that's very meaningful or like what's a quote that matters a lot to me. And one of the things that I often say is that wisdom doesn't follow rules. And as far as I'm concerned, we all have an innate source of wisdom, intuition, and guidance that it doesn't play by the rules. And by rules, it's interesting. I don't just mean, we can interpret rules as meaning things we're not allowed to do that might just land us in jail. I mean, that stuff put aside. I mean, all of the ways that we think, all the things we think we can't do, all of the ways, in quotes, all the things women should do, men can't do, women can't do, people from my background, people from my culture, society, all that stuff, and a lot of it's kind of invisible until it's not. They're all rules. They're all ways that things we buffer up against. And in my experience, those things, they look like the edge of reality. And the truth is they're actually the edge of our thinking, if you like. We're coming up against the edge of our internally generated world. And it feels like more than that, and it's not. So to me, waking up, so spirituality for me, it's not about forms. It's not about whether we do yoga, incense, whether we meditate, whether we pray, all that. To me, it's about this formless source of intelligence that is behind the scenes that's running everything, the very thing that's beating my heart and your heart, the very thing that gives us that amazing idea that takes our business to another level. And the way I see it, Heather, that's not actually cognitive in the way that most people think about it. It's an insight that's coming from somewhere other than our current level of thinking. It's like we have an insight and we're taken into a new level of understanding. And I'm not sure exactly where that comes from, but I see myself and people get struck by that. And I'm curious about that, fascinated by it. So that's what I want for people. I want people to be able to break their own rules, to live a rebellious life, to not have to kind of keep themselves small. And I actually think that can be a lot more simple than it might sound to some people. Like it's and a lot more effortful and fun and joyous. Yeah. How's that for a start?
I love that. And okay, first of all, there were several mic drop statements in there. And one that I certainly recognize, which is the idea that all of what we think is our present reality, and not to go too like woo woo, sure. But all of that we think is our present reality is in fact that it's constructs and thoughts, and it's what we have developed over a lifetime. And sometimes that can be really useful, but it also can be very limiting. And sure. It could be what, again, society we think expects of us. And again, it's we think. And what you're talking about and alluding to is there is an inner wisdom that knows more and can give us more, and is not constrained by any of that. And so you can use your logical way of thinking, and you can get a lot of use out of that, but there's something else that can give you deeper inspiration. And I can say just for myself, through your teachings, we worked every month on some other aspect of my life that I would choose, that I would bring to the table. And it always kind of came back to that, what is your inner wisdom? That's the thing that will guide you the best. And it's what I spend time every morning, tapping into, for lack of a better word, because I'm going to sit there with a cup of tea with my dog next to me, and I'm going to just give myself time for an hour, and just whatever pops into my mind. And what I find with so many leaders, so many people who are really rising in their careers in life, and that I've had the pleasure to interview on this show, is that they're doing something very similar in the morning, or at some point they have some quiet time, and that's when they tend to get their best ideas. But you've really understood the architecture behind it. and by helping people to understand that and tap into it, I think it's extraordinary. I have another question for you kind of around that, and that is, can you define your, distinction for clarity coach?
Yeah. So to me, clarity, so people often talk about clarity and things like that as mindsets and things like that. But the way I see it, it's about how we've been designed. So if you think the metaphor that's often used and that I often like to talk about is that of the snow globe, right? So we can shake up a snow globe. I've got one behind me right there, so you can see how important it is to as an image, as a metaphor. We can shake that up and things get stirred up. And many of the things I think I see people doing, they think they're helping themselves, but it's the equivalent of picking up the snow globe and keep shaking it. We're trying to think positively or convince ourselves that we're okay, and we're basically adding more thought into the system, and it feels heavier and heavier and heavier. As where if you take that snow globe and if you put it down, it will settle. It's kind of, well, why is that? Well, it's because the nature of the water is clear, and that sediment or whatever is in the snow globe settles, and then clarity emerges. And so that's the reason I say sediment is that's an ancient story, I think, from the time of the Buddha, who kind of got someone to go and collect a bucket of water from a pond that had been stirred up from a passing storm, which was a murky bucket of water. They went back later and it was clear, and he kind of said the same thing, and they were like, well, the nature of the water is clear, you just got to leave it. And as I see it, the thing that we miss so often is that clarity comes from one thing in particular, which is understanding how we work. So you mentioned the architecture behind it, and I'll talk about that. I'll expand on that in a minute, because it's really important as I see it. But one of the experience of us without a bunch of insecure thought, when we identify with our thinking, our thoughts start having thought babies. They go off like crazy. We've all had that experience of stories growing stories, right? And it gets heavier and it gets heavier. Well, that's where we're caught. That's a signal letting us know we're caught up. And when we're not so caught up in that stuff, what shows up is clarity, contentment, peace, intuition, creativity, not because they're things that we have earned or gained access to. It's because that's who we are. That's who we are when we're not caught up in all of that heavy thought. And in terms of the mechanics of how it works, most of us we're innocently attempting to work with the content of our thinking. So, for example, we've got a story in our head and we're trying to improve it or make it better. And we're effectively, all of the stuff that's already bumbling around in our head, that's what we're trying to figure out and solve. But the most leveraged thing that we can come to see, in my opinion, is the nature of our experience, not the content of it. So you mentioned about how, we're always living in the middle of this thought-generated world. It's like, yeah, but it doesn't look like that a lot of the time. Like in any given day or any given week, it looks like we're feeling the future. It looks like we're feeling what happened last week. It looks like we're feeling all of the terrible things that could happen if we do this. And we it's such a powerful special effects department that we lose touch with that. We forget that. And when we do, it looks to us like our experience is coming from somewhere else. It looks like we're being impacted by either the future or a world out there with power over how we think and feel. Mm-hmm. And that puts us in a spin. So what I'm more interested in pointing to with people is helping them to see where that's coming from. Because in my experience, and maybe you have experienced this yourself, Heather, the more we start to understand how we work and the more we come to see, wow, that's amazing. I'm always living in the middle of this incredible special effects department. There's a settling in the system, because it doesn't make sense to us to go out into the world and try and change a million things to try and impact how we feel, when we realize, gosh, clarity hasn't gone anywhere. Like it's right here. It's being obscured by all of this stuff that's on the screen. Mm-hmm. But I have a clearing system that when I start remembering how it works, it naturally starts taking things off our mind. And we all know we do better when we've got less on our mind.
I love that. And so really who you are for people, and I can certainly speak from experience, is being able to bring clarity. And I think this is such an empowering conversation, and that process is so empowering, because you realize through coaching, through kind of unveiling and just understanding more about how our inner workings work, that you, in fact, are empowered already. You have wisdom
That's it.
already. And that the best guide you could ever have, honestly, is yourself. Once you're able to tap into that, and when you're able to do that, the amount of appreciation, I think, and trust and self-respect and confidence and all those kind of like ideas, I think they just, shoot up. They just rise because you're able to, not believe in, but just tap into and understand that, wow, I've got a lot of brilliance in me already. And, I don't necessarily need to go out and get every single bit of that. And that I don't need this other person to tell me I'm brilliant or to tell me that I know how to write a song or whatever it is. So it becomes a surface level benefit that's coming from being able to learn about and tap into that inner self. I know that, just a little pivot here, I know that you are also a lifelong learner. You mentioned here how, you have had, the great benefit and really are fascinated by the work that you do. And I think this certainly gives you a desire to do what you do, among other
Yeah.
reasons. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about how you came to the coaching space and your experience with, learning, teaching, having knowledge, earlier career, that kind of
Yeah.
thing? I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah, great. Feel free to stop me because there's always a lot in there to that question, isn't there? So
Yeah.
you
Oh,
feel
yes.
free to stop me and say, "Shush on
Yeah.
that. You need to give us more of this stick." Well, I fell into teaching basically. I'd been away traveling, drinking a lot, partying too much, drugs, just losing myself, and I'd always had a very kind of like wonky relationship with substances and alcohol, you might say. Like throughout my teenage years and younger years, I'd always kind of felt like there was something wrong, and I'd felt very anxious a lot of the time, and yeah, so I'd fallen into a pattern with that stuff early. So I was more interested in traveling and stuff earlier on and just partying. And then at some point, I thought, well, this is gonna. I can't just. I'm gonna need something to pay for this. So I had believe it or not, I had a politics degree. People often laugh when they hear that. They're like, "No way!" But I did. My undergrad was a politics degree. Then I went into early years education, so working with kids up to the age of 5, which was fascinating because hardly any men in that world, interestingly. And so it was a fascinating place for me to be because I was like, why is that? So I kind of just sort of navigating that world and trying to figure that out, and also being fascinated by early childhood development and how the brain develops and all that kind of stuff. So I was kind of fascinated with education and cognition and language acquisition and all that kind of stuff from early on. But then I got into teaching English as a foreign language, traveled around the world, lived for a number of years, lived in Poland for a long time, few different places just to kind of teaching. And I'd spent about 8 years out the UK. I'm based in Liverpool in England. And then came back to the UK, did like what they call a PGC, like a state teaching thing here, and worked in special educational needs for a few years. Worked as an assistant director of a language school in Poland, actually. So that's kind of where my coaching started. I didn't see it like this at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but there were 20 teachers at the school, and it was kind of ad hoc support in the moment. And I quickly realized, hey, it's much better if people have their own wins because they came up with a lesson that works, or if they have their own failures. If they came up with a car crash of a lesson, they get much more from it. So spoon feeding isn't helpful. So I was just asking questions and letting people have the experience they were having, and watching their development, and also realizing that I was getting a huge amount as a teacher myself from the lessons that went wrong. Basically, I was learning vastly more from my mistakes, and it was as great as it is to have a perfect lesson every now and again. And it doesn't feel great to have someone watch as your lesson melts in front of your very eyes. But I learned a huge amount from that, both about me and so I carried that with me. And then I wanted to coach in the education sector more, and long story short, it wasn't going to work for me to coach the teachers where I was. And so I kind of had a decision on my hands, which was, well, it seems too early You're going to jump ship and go into a world that you don't understand, be an entrepreneur, set up businesses, because basically I'd been in a gig that was sort of busy, very busy teaching, but you get told what to do. You turn up, you've got your classes, you got enough to keep you busy, but there's always something coming at you. As we're in with business, it's active in the sense that if you sit on your ass and don't do anything, nothing's going to happen, right? So suddenly I was in this world of like, wow, this is really different, used to that monthly paycheck, so I was out there figuring that out, doing coaching courses, anything I could get my hands on. And at the beginning, it felt very, I was very much wrapped up in the business being me. I needed to prove something. There was a lot of that identity wrapped up. And so I really burnt out, it felt like a huge amount. I can remember having a 6-month period where I was kind of flawed for a while. I was doing some part-time teaching, kept a few clients on. And I realized that it's almost like I've been living with the feeling of, I'm going to miss the bus. I'm going to miss the bus, right? For a few years, and that's taken its toll on the system. And I remember having this insight as I sort of came round from the wisdom in my system putting me on my arse, by the way, because I wasn't listening. And so in the end, the system went, you need to rest, man. But what I remember thinking was, dude, you're not going to miss the boat, man. You're building a boat and no one else can build your boat. So you can get caught up in all those stories of, oh, it needs to happen now and all this stuff. Or you can kind of create from this unique space of knowing you're inherently whole. There's no business that you could build that could possibly complete you, because businesses can't do that. Businesses can help people. Businesses can sell products. Businesses can change lives and do all sorts. But one thing they cannot do, as anything in the world of form can't do, is complete us at that deeper level. Because there's nothing wrong with us. There is no hole in our soul, as I used to feel like there was. Yes. That's made up. That's a deficiency story that we've been innocently running and believing in. So I had to wake up from that. And from then on, my business building in both present and sober, and also rebel spirituality, they've been, business has its moments, right? As you and I both know. But it's been joyous, and it's been full of love, and it's just entirely different. I don't feel weighed down by it. I feel energized. The way I create has changed. People often say to me, how do you do all the things that you do? I'm sure they ask you the same question. And my answer is
quite true.
To be honest, I don't feel like it's me that's doing most of them. Like it's something coming through me, if you like. And I get the pleasure of watching it happen as I open to that wisdom. And that's possible for all of us. That's, as I see it, that's the promise at the heart of all of my work. And that's what I'd love for people to wake up to, is that easeful way of living a rebellious, exciting life, and be able to relax at the same time too, because as I know, you don't want to burn out, and that sucks. That's not so fun.
Yeah, that's I think that's incredible. And first of all, I knew some of your background, and getting to hear more, I think, was really
cool,
fun and interesting, because the early childhood work, being a teacher for young children, and just experiencing, number one, that there weren't really many men in that space, and just being able to find that it was fascinating, and it's interesting because it would have informed a lot of that early behavior. We often will say, kids seem to be almost unburdened with limitation or self-limitation, or any lack of belief or lack of an ability to dream. And then we kind of seem to lose that sometimes as we age, or as life, smacks us down or whatnot. So I think that was really interesting to hear. And then there's so much, but I loved what you said at the end about that kind of easeful. I think I heard you say easeful, which is a word I had not heard before. Easeful way of living.
Maybe it's not a word. Maybe I just made it up. Who knows?
Yeah, and I think it should exist. I love this. And I'm thinking, is that because you're from Liverpool? But anyway, your accent and terminology is always music to my ears. But basically, the idea, like you said, that you can be energized by your own inspiration. And, I love how you talked about it moving through you, and you got to just kind of witness the wonder of it, and benefit from the energy it was giving you, because in the end, you put yourself in a career and a place and a business which feeds you, because you're, I think, using and tapping into your inner wisdom, that is kind of the best fit at the moment. It may change in the future, it may be different as it
Sure.
evolves. And I know you've done some recent evolution of your business, but because you're following that inner inspiration and you're letting it kind of take center stage, you get to be able to benefit from having all that energy. And yes, I agree with you. When I am, more on my inspiration and the things that fuel me, it's like you say, you're, at the end of the day, you're energized, not exhausted. And I think that I would love that for other people who watch this program, is to find either how it is that they can approach whatever job they have, or how it is that they can find a best fit occupation for them that literally fuels them. But being able to first tap into, because it's not an outside in, it's an inside out kind of thing. Tap
That's it.
into that wisdom that lets you find that.
Yeah, that's it. And of course, it doesn't mean one of the things that I think people can hear is that, well, so are you saying that I could get to a point where I never have any uncomfortable feelings or stuff like that? It'd be so easy for me. It's like, yeah, it's not really like that though. Like, it's fun and it's playful. And sometimes we have to crack on, and it takes courage, with
Yeah.
all the clarity in the world. I know that you've made some big decisions over the course of the last few years, and
Yeah.
with all of the clarity in the world, and knowing in our heart that something is what we want to do, that doesn't mean that we're not going to come up against resistance, and one of the patterns I often see is people waiting for that resistance to not be there before they start. And to be honest, we may wait a lifetime. Like, when it comes to writing books, building businesses, asking for that pay rise, having that conversation that we know we need to have, if we're waiting to, like, it's much more empowering, as I see it, to realize that our psychological experience is safe, our human experience is safe. And for many of us, we kind of orient away from it. It looks like it's more than us orienting away from feelings, but that's basically what's going on a lot of the time. And so it doesn't mean that we don't have a rock and roll human experience. What I'm pointing to is, and that's okay, and that we're lit up by that, and we're excited by that, and we intuitively know when it's time to rest, and we also intuitively know when it's time to kind of get out there and get on stage, literally or metaphorically,
Yeah.
and do something that we haven't done before and scare the shit out of ourselves. That's part of it too.
That
Yeah, exactly. So
that leads me actually to a question. I don't want to stop your thought there.
no, it's
It's something that we worked on, and that I know you work on a lot with other people, and that is, can feelings harm us? You have a whole set of teaching around this, and I would love to hear, your thought, because it's like you say, humans, we tend to, at a basic level, try to go towards pleasure and away from pain, or maybe that's just one way of thinking about it.
Yeah, sure.
And that pain tends to be like, we're trying to avoid inner pain, dealing with whatever. Like for me, it was, the passing of my mom. And so you actually had some pretty profound teaching around feelings and us, and whether or not they can harm us, because I think the basic supposition we have as humans, without realizing it, is that we think they can harm us. And feeling feelings is, painful and harmful and all this kind of thing. What can you say about that?
Yeah. So central to, I was going to say, I'm a bit of a mongrel, and then I thought I better give some context, but I'm a bit of a mongrel in how I teach, because, I've spent a lot of time fascinated by many spiritual traditions, and I was a self-help junkie for a long time, and I've spent time, backpacking around India, training as a yoga teacher, sitting in ashrams, all that cliche stuff.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, I stumbled across an understanding by a guy, a chap called Sydney Banks, who brought this into the world. And many people call it the inside out understanding. I like that. But effectively, I've kind of spoken from that space a fair bit during our time together here today, amongst other things. But central to that understanding is the fact that we are living in this internally generated perceptual reality right now. He's got a great quote. I love it. He said, if the only thing that people learn was not to be afraid of their experience, that alone would change the world. So that was Sid Banks. If the only thing that people learnt was not to be afraid of their experience, that alone would change the world. Let's break that down a minute because it's a powerful statement. If the only thing, it's quite the qualifier, if the only thing that they learned was not to be afraid of their experience, he's talking about feelings. He's talking about our psychological experience, right? That would change the world. Now, I'm with him because it seems to me that all around the world right now, there are people drinking, taking drugs, starting fights, doing all sorts of crazy stuff, starting wars, you name it, because ultimately they're afraid of their experience or they're feeling insecure. And from that level of consciousness, all of that stuff makes sense to them. So I think he was really onto something very profound. And as it looks to me, there's a key distinction. My good friend and mentor, Jamie, he talks about this distinction between psychological safety and physical safety. Now, physical safety is something that we're obviously like pay attention, right? If you see a falling piano, get out the way because it's they're going to end well. Me and my mum and my dad were sitting under a tree at the end of my brother's garden the other day. It's huge, by the way. It's about 25 meters tall, this tree. I'm trying to think what that is in feet. I don't know what that is in feet. And this huge part of the branch cracked and it started falling down. And I didn't know how much. And it was fine. It was okay because it didn't fully come off. But I'm there like moving people and trying to get away. And there's no amount of kind of spiritual understanding or self-help guru stuff that's going to save me if I get a massive tree branch on my head, right? So in that moment, get out the freaking way.
Yeah.
So physical safety stuff is often built into the system. And we've kind of got that down pat to some extent. Biologically, we're kind of wired to get out of danger and all of that kind of stuff. I'll come back to that in a moment.
Even babies, when they're born, every mom will know, they know how to throw it's part of that APGAR test, they know how to throw their arms out in case they fall. Yeah.
That's it. Psychological safety. Every single person on the planet has always been psychologically safe. It's never been any different. But the belief that we're not absolutely causes a huge amount of innocent suffering because basically, as we know, beliefs are very, very powerful. And so if you look at nature, nature, you can see acute stress responses everywhere. We've been designed to experience acute stress to get us out of danger and all that kind of stuff. But the belief that we can't means that we tend to hold things in. And over time, those things become chronic. And the system hasn't been designed. The system's been designed to feel stuff and move it through. So for many of us, we may have experienced things in our lives, and it's totally innocent, by the way. And we haven't known that it is safe to feel our feelings, or we've grown up in an emotion phobic society, or we've grown up in a household where girls aren't supposed to be angry and boys aren't supposed to cry, or whatever bullshit it is that we've kind of innocently picked up, which was innocent by our caregivers, by the way, because they picked it up too. But all that stuff, we don't realize that it's like this kind of invisible way of relating to what's going on in the system. And so we're afraid of certain parts of our neurology and all this kind of stuff and feelings. And so we kind of hold it back and we don't feel it so much. And so one of the things that happens a lot in my work, Heather, as you'll know, is that like huge emotional shifts can start happening because someone gets the message, oh, it's safe for me to feel this.
Yeah.
I didn't know that consciously before, but now I do. And when that stuff starts moving, it can have profound impacts on us. And there's so much wisdom in the system that, for hundreds of thousands of years, the wisdom in the system was just taking care of things and allowing things to move through. And then, the mind and the ability to be able to resist and push back, is a wonderful gift. And it also means that we can kind of innocently hold things down and hold things back that just want to heal, that just want to be felt.
And I think a phrase that I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. That's kind of it.
So I think a phrase that you just said is, that I kind of locked onto was that it can become chronic. And so that leads me actually to one of my questions for you, which is, and, here we're back to kind of women and, how we can help them. And if you've got anyone who's up to any significant change in their life, or maybe they're inside one, says, hey, you have the inspiration to go after this new job or this new career or this new thing. And, you've got maybe one of those chronic, issues, or maybe what I can ask is, what are you seeing that maybe women uniquely or maybe not uniquely tend to be faced with that has either capped or limited their potential at some point in their life through maybe even dysfunction?
Yeah, great question. Might need a second to just kind of sit and reflect
Mhm.
on that.
Yeah.
Coming to understand how our experience works is a universal that there are no exceptions to. So that looks to me the central insight that's going to be the most leverage, like I said before, the most leveraged thing that we can see. And I think there are things in particular, it would depend on society and culture and the family that we've grown up in and all that kind of thing. But I'm trying to think of like specifics for women, because there definitely are many, because
I can
I've
give you
worked with,
one.
go on, shoot,
Mhm.
and things will
Yeah.
come to me.
Yeah, I can give you one. And just from my own, observation, I used to be in advertising. That was the world that I was in before real estate. And if I look at the current state of things in the US, and maybe this is the same in the UK, it looks like the alcohol industry, for example, have really made a real push towards women. And I know this was a real concerted, you can
Yeah,
study
for
this
sure.
anywhere and you'll see they really identified women as a target audience about 20 years or so ago. And they've made a real concerted push. They then identified moms as a target audience. They also identified menopausal women as a target audience. And so, because of that, the drinks industry, which has a giant budget and has the ability to create product placement and advertising and literally create a story about how, for example, alcohol, or I don't know, rosé or red wine or whatever, wine in particular, right, may help, all that ails you.
Yeah,
This has created a shift in fact, just industry demographics, with the fact that the amount of money spent per, man, woman, age group, they now know that women and women in certain age groups and, young moms on to, late menopausal women is one of their most important market segments now. And this was a very purposeful, push towards going after that. And it's what I think
yeah.
is the magic of advertising, movies, product placement, all the things you can do with advertising. It's pretty incredible that you can actually create a whole idea and have people want to jump into it. And this has really, I think, changed the way this is thought about, the way that alcohol is thought about, just as an industry. So when I think going after, for example, women as a segment, I think this has been detrimental to women's ability at a time when we have more rights, more perhaps autonomy in certain countries, and more opportunities outside the household maybe than ever to start a business and lead a company or whatever. At the same time that that's happening, we've got an advertising industry that's saying, okay, wow, this is a great demographic. Let's really convince them that, in fact, let's make it part of the empowering women's movement, that they should drink. And so,
Yeah.
what in regards to that are you seeing? Because I know you coach a lot of people, and I know people who have been coached by you to be able to kind of free these bonds. What are you seeing in that process for women, and how they're able to rise after they're getting through this?
Well, yeah, there are definitely. I love that, and that's absolutely true. The fact that essentially it would seem that big alcohol figured out that the amount of booze that they were selling was decreasing, so they found a new market to target, and mummy wine culture, and like you're saying, bottles of rosé and all of this kind of stuff that they directly started targeting throughout the 80s and 90s and beyond.
Mhm.
Is shocking, really. And I mean, this is, the whole questions around alcohol in particular are, particularly that whole thing is like there's so much in there. Basically, it's very. We really need a new understanding when it comes to booze. And sadly, from a biological perspective, women as well, if they're trying to like keep up and drink a lot, they get really heavily impacted by it, as we all do. But there are specific things that are, more impactful for women in terms of breast cancer risk and many different things that can impact women. So as an isolated thing in terms of that, one of the most amazing life hacks that anybody can experience, as I have seen, is to drink less or to take drinking out of their life. Now, I'm certainly not, it's not my goal or my kind of mission to kind of tell everybody what they should or shouldn't do. But I have seen a number of people, particularly in business, entrepreneurs, who they just see such a boost in just so many different things from drinking less or stopping drinking. And so all of that and more, and I think I guess one of the things that I tend to do when I sit with someone, Heather, is just kind of really listen to their specific thing that they're bringing. And you're right. For whatever reason, I tend to work with lots and lots of women. So my groups are often more than half women that come along. I'm not sure exactly why that is.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for it. I'm very grateful to be surrounded by incredible women that are able to transform and change their own worlds. And then it has such profound impacts on the world around them. And I see the implications. Many women come and talk to me about, feelings, purpose and meaning, particularly if they've had an experience of raising children while working, and then the kids have left home, and then they're trying to figure out, well, what now? Like, who am I when I'm not in this role of mother? And that's something that's quite common. That comes up a lot. Lots of people bring to me questions around insecurity and worry around being a caregiver, and kind of realizing that they've internalized this. I think for many women, and I'd love to hear what you say on this, because
Yeah.
I have never been a woman. so I can't sit here and I for sure don't want to kind of pretend for a second that I know what it's like, but I can only just listen and kind of try and understand and try my best to kind of help people as best I can. Is getting caught up in this idea that kind of worrying about our kids or worrying about is a form of kind of love or something, that it's like something that's necessary. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? And like how, like, and trying to help people figure out this meaning. So it's funny, because I think one of the reasons why I'm reflecting on your question and thinking about your particular audience, Heather, is that much of the work that I do with women isn't necessarily with, it will be with some women who are business owners and entrepreneurs. Tends to be a lot of women who have been drinking a lot, like you said, and this kind of thing, or perhaps looking for purpose and looking for a new lease of life, or whatever it might be. And so it tends to be less work around the business world and more about the personal stuff. And of course, those two things interrelate. Like there's no, like we think about it like there's some big distinction between the two, but of course, all of the lines blur. So yeah, I don't know if that's in any way helpful, but that's what comes to me in this. I'm not sure I answered your question, to be honest.
No, but well, I think you did quite a bit. And you alluded to a few things that I think are important too, which is it could, alcohol does play a role, and it can, depending on the person. And it has been very interesting as a society to see how this can be, that this is something that wasn't always that way, and that women are walking into a massive amount of advertising that is really directed at them to think a certain way around alcohol that was not directed at them before. And it is unique. It is different. When my kids were little, it was not usual that when, little mom groups were hanging out and our kids were hanging out as little toddlers, that we would have wine. It wasn't really, we had some snacks and stuff, but, fast forward even 5 or 10 years from that, and almost every kind of mommy meetup seemed to have something to do with a glass of wine, or it was just kind of socially normal that would be there. And it's just increasing the idea that, oh yeah, this is how we are now, but it wasn't always how it was. And I think that there's, some detriment to that for people that doesn't work for. And for those that it does, I mean, that's great. But the other thing you mentioned is, specifically women have this concept around caregiving, and that this, first of all, can be one of our biggest strengths and amazing things we bring to the world. But yes, I can say, having worked with so many women and mentored so many over the years, that it also can weigh really heavily. And so just even being able to recognize that is, again, like you say, a social construct, or even just like a self-imposed, mission, that it can stop the ability of forward progression of other goals because there's a lot of, maybe female guilt around, I need to be there for my parents, or I need to whatever. And also just understanding, how do we go forward if a huge portion of our life was spent either raising children or caring for elders in our family, or being, an important caregiving sibling or something like that. And having your career maybe interrupted several times, or maybe your own natural inspiration for a company. Maybe you had an idea when you were 20, and but you've made it to 35 or 40, and now you finally get time to do your goals. And this will be something that is, it's almost like you feel maybe like you're starting from scratch. So I think that's so beneficial to be able to help help others, like you said, tap back into that wisdom, and also maybe lift some of that weight or guilt, or some of the thought around, a woman as the center of their household, and being able to even just have permission as well to do all the things that they may be inspired to do, but maybe kind of suppressing, and could even be suppressing with things like wine, and having, like you say, emotions that are safe to feel, and that we don't know we're safe to feel our emotions. And then maybe using something like alcohol, or whatever other outlet to suppress those things, when in fact allowing ourselves to feel and knowing that we're safe to do that, I think is extremely valuable, because what's left after that happens is, I think, inspiration.
That's it. So that's fascinating. So as I sit and listen to you, I'm kind of really just thinking, what would I be up to if I were kind of talking to somebody in a coaching session or something? And what strikes me is a lot of that stuff you mentioned, I just think that often looks invisible to people a lot of the time. I'll give you an example of that. I've worked with many, many women who, when we've really got to the root, it's like, I have these desires, these things that I want to bring into the world. I want to travel, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. And when I'm like, what stops you? Which seems like a very obvious question, but what gets in the way? Someone might say, well, it's selfish for me to do that, or something. And it's totally innocent, but it's constructed because perhaps somebody may have spent their whole life putting other people ahead of themselves, whatever it might be. And I know that, I think, so I'm always going to be curious to listen to what that individual person brings to the table, if you like. But the thing I'm fascinated about is, where are they not seeing these invisible things that are getting in the way? Like, where are they identifying with something like that? Like, it's selfish for me to do my own thing, or to kind of choose myself or something, and really kind of just lean into that and just kind of explore it. Because if somebody can wake up and realize, oh shit, that's made up, like, that's not true, that's not real, then amazing things can happen. And in terms of relationship, this is both true for men and women. I think I very often talk to people who are convinced that it's all coming from the other person, right? Because it looks like it. It's like all of my problems are coming from this other person, and I need to, if they change their behavior, then everything would be okay right now. So we kind of have a discussion, and I remember having a conversation with a lady, and I remember saying to her, what would you most like to get from our work together the next 12 weeks? She said, a divorce. I said, right, okay, would you be willing to put that on the shelf just for the 3 months that we're going to work together? And then if that still looks like what you'd love to do, I certainly am not going to ever tell anybody what to do, but would you be willing to just, explore some stuff together? She said, sure. Anyway, we explored a lot of the stuff that we were talking about earlier in the show. And she had a lot of insights about how her experience works. And at some point she came and she said, it's a miracle. I said, what? She said, I'm in love with my husband again. And I was like, how did you account for that? How did that happen? And she was kind of like, I don't really know. I don't know how it happened. But what she'd seen was her world was being created from within. Now, I'm not saying there aren't times when separation isn't wisdom and all that. That's not what I'm saying. But what I do know for sure is, as soon as we remember or see how our experience works, we gain access to clarity. And for a lot of people, just as an example, it may look to them like their partner is stopping them from doing something, or they think they can't do this, they can't do that. And so there may be some resentment there. But I've seen a number of people wake up to the fact of, oh, it's actually me. Like, I've got this idea that I can't do this, or I shouldn't do that, or they'd say this, or they'd stop me. and they haven't even had the conversation, or they haven't. And so it's that internal stuff that's going to make the difference. And of course, that's going to be different for men and women. And I think there are definitely some patterns that we see a lot. But just in listening to what you were sharing there, it was sparking things in my head. It's funny,
Yeah.
you asked that question, and my mind went a little bit kind of quiet. But listening to your reflections, suddenly, all of these things and curiosities started sparking off in my head. And
Yeah.
yeah,
It's that, I think, well, and I love how this is how conversation with you flows. And, when we had coaching sessions, you don't all it's not a straight line. We start with something and I might have
right.
had like a topic. But somehow in an hour, whatever coaching session, we would get there. And because it's like you said early on when you talked about your experience teaching, oftentimes, it's so much more instructive for the person if they can arrive at their
Sure.
finding themselves. And so what you're seeking to do is guide really breakthroughs or just realizations. And sometimes the biggest realizations I would have that would give me wonderful insight into my own, let's call preconceived notions or suppositions. Like the
Yeah.
woman had a lot of preconceived notions about her husband or what he would allow or not allow, only to find that a lot of that was just existing in her head. But some of the best, I think, revelations that I would have would be within a day or something of speaking with you, if not on the call, because it's my mind would just go like, whoa, and it would keep working on it while I slept or when I got up the next day. And I would just go like, oh my gosh, I'm mind blown. I now have come to this realization that I can do X or whatever. It is a fascinating process, and it's so instructive. You mentioned kind of two things that gave me a couple questions.
Yeah.
And one is just returning to that special effects department, which I think is it's the first time I've ever heard anyone phrase it that way. When you talk about our own internal or inside out experience of the world around us, is that, the sky could genuinely be blue, but our mind might create a whole lot of else around that. And, you could have two people sitting together witnessing the same sunset, and their individual experience emotionally and otherwise,
Sure.
and memory and everything, and even maybe their story, if they recounted it the next day, could be different of that sunset. But it's because we are generating in the moment all kinds of thoughts about what's happening to us and emotion and everything else. And you've called it our internal special effects department, like a Hollywood, movie making special effects department. And I swear, I think that has been probably one of the most cool and on track ways that I've heard that described, because I know, at least for me, I could immediately understand what that is. What is a Hollywood special effects department? They're manufacturing something.
Sure.
And can you talk a little bit about that? And then I'll
Yep.
just give you one more, which is insecurity and imposter syndrome, because we talk about this so much in business coaching circles. If you want to be on stage one day, or maybe you find yourself in a management position, and that imposter syndrome is really to say that you feel you don't belong there yet, that you don't fit yet, but you find yourself there. And so I think you can talk around those two things, actually.
Yeah. So I wish I could take the credit for the special effects department thing. I've heard it in a few different places. I've heard a couple of people refer. I'm not sure if it's exactly in that way. But again, one of my friends, Jamie, he uses that, and it really. I remember it really struck me when I heard it. There's many different ways we might talk about that, but like we're living in our own thought generated reality. We're living in the feeling of our neurology, physiology, biology, and psychology creating an experience for us in every single moment. There's different ways we could talk to it, but I also find the special effects metaphor incredibly helpful. And the thing about special effects is, if you think about it, the whole point of a good special effects department is you don't know that it's a special effects department, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you watch a film and the special effects are a bit shit, you're like, maybe it's funny for a bit, and then you're like, I can't handle it anymore. Like, get it off. But when you watch something and you don't know, and that's what we're dealing with, the power of thought, which is another way of of talking about it. And by thought, I don't just mean our thinking. I mean everything. I mean feelings, sensations, emotions, the unconscious. The special effects department is incredible. It is, as far as I can see, the most advanced experience generation mechanism. I've never said that before. That's cool.
I love that.
Experience mechanism generation thing, whatever it was I just said, in the universe. And it's doing it every single second live. And so the thing is, we relate to the world as if there's fixed objects in it, right? We relate to the world as if we're looking out at the world and I can see things that are solid, but that ain't the reality. Color, for example, isn't a quality of the world out there. Color is an internally generated gift that we use to help us navigate and move around the world. Colors don't exist outside our perception. So perceptions and what we're working in, that's so powerful. Because for most people, they've never thought about that, Heather. You know, people believe, for example, they can feel the future. That's just like any given day or any given week, about however many times most people, if you were to stop them and talk to them about it, it really looks to them like they can feel the future.
Yeah.
That's not possible. We can't do that. We can feel the power of thought. It's an illusion. But
Yeah.
it's a powerful one. And every time you fall for the illusion, you start getting into all sorts of like stirred up thinking, and you start trying to solve problems before they've arrived. You start trying to deal with the future before you've got there. And one of the things about wisdom, as I see it, is that wisdom is an adaptive, in the moment intelligence that is only available now. Why? Because it's all you got. There's no other time. Now's not even a time. It's just this passing moment, this ineffable, indescribable, mysterious moment that we're all living in, and that we are, we are this. And we innocently lose sight of that when we get caught in our thought worlds, because the adaptive intelligence, it doesn't work so well up there. Like, we can innocently scare the crap out of ourselves and we don't have access to the things that we have in the moment. Usually we get to something we've scared ourselves to death about. We get there in the moment and we're okay. We do just fine. And, there's, in all sorts of ways, a lot of what we're running is out of date. So most of the stories we're running are out of date. We have a thought. The moment you have a thought, it's basically out of date as I see it. You have a thought in the moment. It might be the most amazing, wisdom-based, incredible thing in the world to support you in this moment. That doesn't mean it's helpful 10 seconds from now. Who knows what you're going to need, but you have something that's going to give you what you need 10 seconds from now, but it ain't going to come 10 seconds before or 10 seconds after. There's only one option. So one of the most powerful things for me is hearing at a deep level that this adaptive intelligence that I'm talking about is real. It's not a nice idea. It's not some made up hippy dippy la la kumbaya nice idea type thing. It's a real force or energy or power that resides at the heart of your being that is animating everything. And it's orders of magnitude more powerful than the intellect. In fact, it's so much more intelligent than the intellect, if you like, that it grew and evolved the intellect. so it's like it has the wisdom of everything that's ever come within it, contained within it, and it can deliver the goods when we need it. So that's what the set here's just okay. Let me come full circle.
Well, and can we say conscious, that the intellect is what we might know as our conscious intelligence?
It's funny. I guess it depends what people mean by that. When I say the intellect, I guess I mean the kind of prefrontal cortex, rational, judging, analytical element of the mind. Now, and I think it's fantastic. I'm not planning on giving mine up. I'm going to keep mine for as long as I can. It's wonderful, right? But the mind in its judgment and its analysis and its concepts and labeling, it's, if you think about it, you have a rich experience of what's happening and you can't describe it. It's before words. It's just this. And the mind comes in and labels and describes and conceptualizes. Now, that's a wonderful world in which to work, to kind of analyze things and judge things, all that kind of stuff. They're very powerful things, amazing faculties. But wisdom, as I see it, is something else. Like it often shows up as intuition. How it speaks is often just that feeling that tells us you should get a second opinion, or that knowing of you should ring this person, or I don't know, like it's super simple though. It's not, They often say it's not exotic.
Yeah.
People seem to think that wisdom is this like thunderbolt from the skies moment every night. I'm like, no, it's constantly animating you and moving you if you're open to it. And it tends to speak in, okay, yes, or not right now, or I don't really know. It's kind of simple. Another
Mhm.
quote from Sid Banks, he said, if it's complicated, it's the intellect. If it's simple, it's spiritual. What I hear in that is the mind can infinitely complicate things. You can go around the houses a million times, but wisdom is simple in the sense that we just get often we know what we need to do. We get struck by it, right? Then the mind comes up with all the reasons why we can't. And I say the more, so it takes courage to live from wisdom, by the way, because you are
Yeah.
going to have to break the rules. And by that, I mean all of the ways that you've always done it. Wisdom doesn't give a shit. It's going to be like that way. And you'll be like, but. And it's like, no, that way. And you'll be like, yeah, but. And it will say, yeah, but do it. and
Exactly.
often we can live our whole life with that. And then we finally take the action or we do the thing. And it fills us with joy and it fills us with
Mhm.
excitement and inspiration.
And we grow. So two things to follow up on that. You know, wisdom, I wrote uncomfortable because when that wisdom says no, do the thing, and you're going no, 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 I like to sit on my sofa and eat chips, like don't tell me that, or I don't want to go start a new business, and it's like, this is like, here's your thought, like this can be you, or go for it, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
You may have to get a bit uncomfortable, which is something we often talk about in business, circles. You may have to get uncomfortable to go to that next place that maybe you are inspired to go to, because it's not something you've already done. And so with that thought, and I want to go back to insecurity and imposter syndrome in a
Yes.
minute. But I first want to talk about something that came up while you were speaking and around this, and that is the past is not a place.
Yeah.
And I think we think it is, that it's going to come back to get us, that the bully from high school is still making, summations about us, or, that we still have to fear or behave in a certain way because of a dramatic incident in our past, or that because people thought of us as not whatever, then that means we're not. And right, all this thing, or because we performed in a certain way we didn't like in the past, or behaved in a certain way we didn't like in the past, that we're stuck and that we're going to continue doing that. Can you talk around the past is not a place?
Yeah. Well, we have to, this is kind of it's a very powerful recognition. You hear things like, be here now, the now is all we have. And some of these things, they feel kind of like cliches or nice things that you might see on a key ring or something like that, which isn't very helpful. But if something's truly recognized and seen, it can be life changing. And so the thing I often say to people is, without the power of thought that allows you to imagine a past and a future, they don't exist, right? Like,
Mm.
this is it. There is no there. So the there of 10 years ago and the there of 20 minutes from now, whatever, their mind generated things. Now, I understand it can seem very much like there's a rich experience of the past, that we can have a powerfully generated image of something that happened all those years ago or whatever. But there's something very powerful that happens from truly coming to realize that, like you said, Heather, the past isn't a place. You can't visit there. You can't go there. And the mind will go, yeah, well, but what about this and what about that and all the rest of it? But something I after was recording some content earlier, and I was kind of like, look at your feet or look at your hands, So you've only ever been where your hands are. You've never been anywhere else. Your hands can't reach into the past or they are here, as are you. It's very freeing to realize that,
Yes.
to truly see that, because for as long as it's kind of like a nice idea and it doesn't help, but if it's really seen, it can start to really free us, and we start to realize, wow, yeah, I actually can't ever go there in actuality. It's not somewhere I can visit. Like, me and you can't go for a coffee in the past. We can't go for a coffee in the future. There, without the power of thought, the past is the power of thought. The future is the power of thought. And I'm not, by the way, saying that terrible things didn't happen or amazing things didn't happen at some point, and that we don't have things that we may be experiencing somatically. And, there's a lot of conversation, I think, for very good reason, around traumatic experiences and difficult experiences. I think it's possible to catch sight of the deep truth of the fact that there is only now.
Yeah.
There's nothing outside of it. And realize that the only healing that takes place is now too.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think there is benefit to many different interventions. I think therapy and all these, they're fantastic. They're incredible. But many people get to a point where they kind of sense they've hit a point of diminishing returns, I think. And that understanding why it happened and kind of delving into the past in terms of telling the story and over, they kind of intuitively sense that's not helping. Now, at that point, I think it's those deeper recognitions that we're talking about here about, Eckhart Tolle talking about the power of now. As I see it, the real power of now is it's all you got. It's all you got. Like, try being anywhere else. I
love that. Well, and I think one of the big messages I got from what you just said, and which I've heard actually in a coaching session with you when we were, speaking to something for me, is that if the past is not a place and you can't go there, and it's only generated through current thought, story making in the mind, then it also can't get you. Like, the past can't come here and apply itself to your life now, because you yourself are the only one that's doing that, conscious or otherwise, and knowing more about how that all works and being able to, create clarity, which is why I love, by the way, that you call it clarity coaching, is because through clarity, you can tap into the now and the now you and the now inspiration and the now internal wisdom, which says, go do this, or how about that? Or like you said, it's quite quiet and I tend to hear it most mornings. And it just takes away all the brain going, blah, the past, the future, the whatever. And I love what you said about that the future is not a place. If your hand can't go there, like my hand just went off screen, if the hand can't go there, then we're not there and we can't go there. But we think that we can predict it, and we'll create a lot of worry. What if my marriage is like this? What if my job is like that? What if I go on stage and it's terrible? Well, what if you go on stage and it's great? I talk to my agents all the time to say, look, you didn't reach that client and you say they've ghosted you, but really you don't know. And you don't know the reason, and you don't know what your next phone call will be like.
True.
So if you're going to create a supposition, at least don't go for the negative, go for the positive. You know what? Yeah, they didn't take my call, but they love me and they can't wait to work with me and they're just busy right now. At least create an empowering future, because you are creating in the moment. And I find, my agents will all the time, like, what? Mind blown. Like, I don't believe what you just said, because they didn't realize that they were in fact creating negativity, and predicting either the future or predicting the thoughts of another human, which they can't go in their skull and open up. And probably that human doesn't know their thoughts either. So I do want to go back to insecurity and imposter syndrome. I know kind of the what that concept means, and I'm sure because we dealt with it as well. You have clients that are maybe trying to be up to big things, and it's probably one of the biggest things that maybe is stopping them, among other stuff, like if they have to deal with other things in their mind or past or whatever that's not working for them. But that idea, like, I'm not fit for purpose for the thing that I wish or hope or desire to do. And how can you speak around that?
Yeah. So I guess as the way I see I like the term insecurity because it feels like a really great umbrella term for like all of the things that we can get caught up in. We can worry about this, or we can have some kind of fear around this thing happening or whatever it might be. And so we all have our own way of relating to what feeling insecure is like. And we know we're not at our best when we feel insecure. And if we've got insecure goggles on, we look out into the world and the world looks one way. We tend to, we tend to think, oh, that's never going to work out. And how about this thing and all this kind of stuff. And it colors, the kind of world that we're looking out at. which is worth knowing, like it's easy to lose that or to sort of lose sight of that. Sorry. It's getting late in the day here in the UK, so my words are starting to
Yeah.
malfunction as they come out of my mouth. But that's worth knowing, just understanding that the kind of goggles that we have on. So, maybe here's a great example. Maybe we're tired. Maybe we're a bit caught up and we look at the world and everything looks like, oh God, we've all had that experience. It looks like that. We have a good night's sleep. We wake up in the morning and we're like, what was I worried about? Like, it's going to be just fine. We're away. So, when it comes to insecurity, I think it's something that we all have the power to be able to create that. And when I say, it's not like we're doing it on purpose. It's not like we wake up
Right.
in the morning and go, at 4:30, I'm going to make myself feel really, really insecure. That sounds fun. It's not like that, right? It can be created through the system. And it has a function, right? At the end of the day, as I see it, insecurity is, I guess it's, so for example, if I walk down the street and I look down a dark alleyway and I get insecure about going down there, listen up, right? That's
Yeah.
the special effects department giving us information is attempting to keep us physically safe. Who knows? Like you've got an amygdala in a system that's developed over millions of years that's unconsciously picking up data that you don't even know that's going on, and then it provides a feeling, So I'd say listen up, that's an interesting thing. I went on a special self-defense course, and there was a lot of discussion in there around women innocently but overriding some of those natural intuition signals. I think it'll be okay. And so a lot of the beginning of the self-defense course was about saying, no, you need to listen to that. We need to
Yeah.
relearn to tune into that shit because it's trying to keep you safe. So as I see it, anything that we can create, it has its purpose, right? It's not like there's a mistake in the system. Oh God, the special effects department went wrong and it means that I can create this experience of insecurity. Like that doesn't look like a mistake. There's a use for it, but what we tend to do is overuse and apply it to things because we think it's going to get us something. So for example, one of the invisible things I used to believe about the world was that worrying about stuff got me something. I used to think it kept me safer. I used to think it kept people around me safer. This was unconscious, by the way. It's like invisible.
Yeah.
And waking up to see that that's not the case is incredibly helpful. So there's a bit on it. I don't know where you want to go with insecurity.
You just described the heavy weight of motherhood.
Got it. Well, there we go,
Worrying about things all the time and believing that that's a benefit to the family. And sometimes that causing friction if you have, I don't know, a teenager and you want to worry a lot more than the teenager thinks is necessary. And you feel that you're doing a benefit to the family and it's creating friction because we're innocently trying to predict the future, or we have that sense of worry. And so, okay, so I'm about to go on stage, say, and it's not a dark alley, and maybe the amygdala or something is saying, okay, do that. But I've got intense worry about what's going to happen. And, I've never done it, for example.
Great. So let's just finish one more thing on that last point, and then we'll flow into that. We'll see if we can manage that at this time of night, right? So the mind has the ability to create insecurity in an attempt to keep us safe, right? So yes, there's that thing that can often happen where, for example, a mum might be worrying about, I think this was true for my mum, for sure. I've spoken to her about this, I think she probably still does, worries about me and my brother because at some level it feels like it might be helping or keeping us safe or something. And the thing that seems so powerful to wake up to and see is what we all have going for us, including, this is true of my mum, it's true of your kids, Heather, it's true of everybody's kids, is that we all have this adaptive wisdom that's at the heart of our being that's going to guide us and help us out. And like, again, it sounds trite as like a nice idea to try and think positively about. But when we really see the evidence of that in people, it can really, like, caring makes total sense. But when we realize it's unhelpful through to futile, as in it's not doing anything, then we can be freed from it and we can free up a lot of space. And often when we're not in the worry space or in the insecurity space, what do we have more access to? Clarity. What do we feel more connected? What do we have more connected conversations with our loved ones? What do they have? Insights.
Yes.
Right. So it's all built into the system. So you're not losing anything. But so I just wanted to kind of, because I think that's an important thing. And that leads into the next thing about walking up on stage, right? So
Yeah.
I remember the first time that I did a face back when Facebook Lives were like a new thing, doing a Facebook Live for This Naked Mind, and there was 1,000 people on there or something, and I was like, oh shit, I've never done this before. And so I can remember my system having a moment about it. Sweaty hands, my heart was up, I was kind of having all these feelings come up and all this kind of stuff. And it's really funny. I remember something appearing for me in that moment that I'd heard a while back, which was someone saying, yeah, what if all of that, a lot of that's wisdom? What if the meaning making of that isn't necessary? Because it would be easy to say something's wrong. I need to do something about this anxiety. I need to sort myself. It's like picking up the snow globe and shaking it, right? So I heard that and I was like, I don't need to do anything other than breathe and trust that I'm going to be okay when I get there. So I click go live, this stuff starts falling out of my system. And then suddenly I'm off and I love talking. You may have noticed. So there I am just kind of giving all of this. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like the best thing I've ever done in my life. And there I am kind of loving being live with people. And it became one of the mainstays of my, a lot of the work that I used to do for This Naked Mind. And, so, and that was amazing, right? So there's that element of it is what if we didn't make a load of meaning? What if actually it's just your system getting you ready for something that's important to you? And what if you don't touch it? What if it's, going to move through you and pass through? So that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the imposter thing, it's interesting, like I see this in a few different ways. On one level, on one hand, I'm kind of like, I think it's kind of natural that we feel like an imposter when we step into a new level. We kind of look around us and it's like we're playing a bigger game, right? So I can remember, or every time I've stood in a room of people, that whole thing of like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, kind of like that. Like,
Exactly. Yes. Surround yourself with others who maybe have what it is that you want, or where you feel uncomfortable is where you're going to learn the most.
So there are times where, so at one level, that's absolutely true. And so I think it's very, very natural that we can have feelings of insecurity and stuff, and we kind of compare and that's what the mind does. Okay. And at the same time, in my experience, a lot of imposter syndrome is kind of like a more kind of, I guess, deep-seated feeling of not enoughness or a deficiency thing or lack, or that there's something wrong. And I just know that that's not true for anybody. Like I know for sure that we can all wake up to the fact of our inherent wholeness. Like we can all wake up to the fact that there's truly nothing wrong with us and that we're all incredible beings who can do just amazing things in the world. And that amazing thing can be whatever shows up. That might be building amazing businesses, raising a family with all of the love and the presence that you can. It might be becoming a fantastic sports person. Who knows? It might be writing a book. It might be learning to paint. It might be being the best grass cutter the world has ever seen. Like I just it's going to take all sorts, and I just think that's wonderful and beautiful. And like again, it's almost like even the idea of imposter syndrome. Actually, I just remembered something that, again, my friend Jamie said to me. He said, the real imposter is the imposter syndrome, right? That's the imposter. Like it's popped in. Like that's the real imposter. Like you're the wisdom and intelligence behind life. Of course that you can be at this level. Of course you can be doing that. And then this little imposter, this little worried thought, this little kind of like, oh, like, are you sure that you can do this kind of stuff? And if we identify with that, we feel it and it looks real to us and it kind of expands in our mind. But that's not the truth of who we are. We're capable of so much, and so these days, I'll tell you one of my tricks, and then I'd love to hear, because I saw you writing a couple of things down. Here's one thing. I don't believe anything my mind says, as to the best that I can. Like, and except for the times that I do. And what I mean is, I know that there's always a bunch of stuff being created in my head that's kind of a mixture of like conditioning and all sorts of stuff. And it's happening right now in this very moment, but it's kind of filtered through my belief systems and all that kind of stuff. So my mind can come up with all sorts of junk, like you won't be able to do that, or who are you to say that, or like,
Right.
da 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 da. But so I just like,
they will think.
Yeah, I have a blanket. I'm like, it's all bullshit. I don't have to listen to any of it, apart from if I fall for the trick and identify with something and it feels real, because then I will wake up to the fact that I've been hoodwinked again whenever I happen to wake up, which happens very, very quickly these days compared to how it used to. Like there are things that Rebel Spirituality, that project, basically for a decade, I listened to my insecurity and didn't launch that project. And then one day I was putting something in the fridge, completely mundane, and an insight. And I realized, oh, the fact that you're so darn in your head about this, that's a go signal, man. That's that's what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
That's who you really are, calling you into a new way of being, a new way of living. And I suddenly knew it. And like the next week I posted a
Yeah.
podcast and I cracked on with it. And up until then it had looked like way more. In my brain, I didn't, it was kind of like I was up against like an invisible wall that I couldn't move beyond or something. And I had this insight and the whole thing melted. I realized it's just thought. It's just thought that's looked like it's more than that.
This is fantastic, and I have several thoughts around this. And what you just described at the end, the fact that you can wake up to your own intuition sooner and wake up also to like that your mind has been putting a lot of reasoning on you, which is interfering actually with your own inspiration, your own drive, and your own desires. The fact that you can wake up to it quicker and sooner now, I think that's kind of the promise for me of coaching. And, that's what you can get from this world. If you can, unpeel whatever habits or whatever that is, stopping you, and also unpeel and understand the difference between your own wisdom that will appear very quietly and maybe be somewhat insistent, and then your thoughts, which are just going all the time and kind of running amok, or putting a lid on what would otherwise be perhaps your greatest ideas. And so, just I think to kind of put everything in a capsule, I would just say we're at a point where, if people can tap into you and your wisdom, and if people can tap into you as a coach and or find, someone or something for them that works, what's available to them is everything. It's everything that they don't already have. It's everything that they could ever imagine or be inspired by. It's everything that they could ever want. And it's all inside them, but it could be just really trying so hard to get out. But you've got this incredible computer, upstairs that's really creating limitations there innocently, like you say, and without any realization that it's not trying to be helpful. And I wanted to ask you a couple things, and I'm conscious of the fact that we may be nearing our time. And you've mentioned two people that obviously I know about them from having been coached by you for years, but Jamie Smart and Sydney Banks. If we were to, because I love to kind of give book recommendations as well on our episodes. And if you can mention maybe what would be a book of either one of those individuals that someone could pick up and start to tap into this. And then also, where can they find you? Maybe you can mention Rebel Spirituality. I know you said that is really your newest passion project, if I can call it that literally is not just about, like, say, the sobriety or not world, but really more about people just literally being able to up level their lives and find clarity and go for whatever they want to go for. What are your thoughts around those things?
Yeah, love it. So Jamie's a good friend of mine. So hang on, which order to do this? So there was a chap called Sydney Banks who had an impromptu. He was the most surprised, I think, awakening experience. He was kind of like a Scottish guy who hadn't really read many books, wasn't very particularly book smart, worked in a mill, and had this profound experience where he kind of woke up to the nature of reality. And he spoke about people who kind of like to share how he saw things. I like to talk about the inside out in understanding. You will have heard that throughout my call today. And some people talk about innate health, the innate health that we hold within us. And so, I would say if anyone's interested in that, just go and listen to videos on YouTube of Sid. There's plenty of them, and just kind of listen for a feeling and kind of just follow your curiosity on that. Now, Jamie Smart is a good friend of mine and a mentor of mine. His book is called Clarity. So you talk about me being a clarity coach. I've done a number of things with Jamie training back in the day, and I continue to listen to him because I think he's a powerhouse of just insight and love and care, and I really think he is trying to bring like a new paradigm of understanding psychology and how we work to the world, as many people are, but he's a fantastic communicator. So he has 2 books. One's Clarity, the other one's Results. I'd recommend them both. Just kind of whatever one piques your interest the most. I would kind of go and tune into and listen to. So that's that. And it's kind of, they share. I have my own way of sharing the understanding. There's a few people that share it, amongst a bunch of other things as well. Like I have a rich history of a lot of kind of meditation and yoga and things that I mentioned earlier. So I kind of mix everything and amalgamate things together and kind of teach from just, as I say, I'm a mongrel. I kind of just share what makes sense to me. Which leads me to Rebel Spirituality, which has its own podcast. So if anyone's interested, I'd say go check that out. 10 minutes a week, just me riffing and reflecting on many of the things that we've spoken about today. Actually, I do think just last week, I had a podcast which was, why it's so powerful to understand how experience works. But we talk about insecurity, I talk about fear, I talk about limiting beliefs, I talk about all sorts of things on that. So that's just a weekly thing that goes out. So I'd just direct people towards that. And as far as projects and things like that go, like if people feel called, you can go to samgoldfinch.com. That will have both the Present and Sober Project and Rebel Spirituality, the websites, and you can explore everything from there. I'm gonna need to take another drink because I'm losing
That's fine. Yes, I know it's hard when you speak for a living. Yeah, when you speak for a living, it can be difficult, as you and I do. And I am, as you said, catching you in the evening, quite late now in Liverpool. So you were mentioning samgoldfinch.com.
That's it, samgoldfinch.com. You'll find both the websites there. If anyone's listening and they have a meditation practice or they kind of they're interested in self-help, the whole point of Rebel Spirituality for me is to help people who feel like they're seeking. They either feel like self-help junkies, but they can sense it's out of balance. It's like it's kind of an addiction, or they're kind of spiritual seekers and they've been going around in circles for years and years, and they just want to kind of wake up so they can just relax and take life less seriously. And that doesn't mean that, you can't read books and you can't listen to amazing podcasts like this and that stuff, but it becomes more playful rather than this, like, I have to. It's like this desire that I can find this thing that's going to complete me. Like it's going to finally kind of, that kind of energy. My passion is kind of waking people up to their inherent wholeness, that they can just relax and have more fun. And I have a number of programs that people can, all the details for that will be on my Rebel Spirituality website. But the first thing I'd say, just go check out the Rebel Spirituality podcast. You'll hear me talking about it. You'll get the run of it. You'll see I'll give updates for all of those kinds of things. And if anybody in particular is listening to this and you happen to be rethinking your relationship with alcohol or any of that, there's also the Present and Sober podcast, which you mentioned. Yes. But yeah, that's most of what I'm up to. I've tried to keep it simple. samgoldfinch.com, and it's all there.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to say how, from my heart, I so appreciate your genuine brilliance and all the work and time that you put into being who you are, knowing all that you do, that benefits everyone who is in your world, because you are so knowledgeable. But at the same time, I think it's you, the person, who is the greatest benefit, because you can see into the rest of us. You can know what to say at the right time, and you have helped me and others that I know to go on to create and do brilliant, amazing things that otherwise may, I certainly think, not have occurred or incurred in that period of time. And also, I've watched you and known that you've helped people regain their sense of self, regain their sense of trust of themselves, and just genuinely be able to just go forward powerfully, whatever it was that was holding them back, substance or any other thing. So I appreciate you so much. I just want to honor that, you have been here, and what gifts that I'm sure you are providing to our audience. So thank you so much for joining us today, Sam.
Well, thank you for having me, and your audience is very lucky to have you. I'm excited for where this goes. I'm not sure where I'll be in the release schedule and all that kind of stuff, but I'm super, super excited to see where this goes. And I know that, everybody here is in very good hands. And I've seen you create some absolutely incredible things in timescales that I've been like, no freaking way. Like we've had a session before, and you've come in the next week, and you're like, well, I did this, this, and this, and I'm like, just like, whoa, that's crazy shit. So that is amazing. And I think, I think anybody who's in your orbit, either professionally, personally, is lucky to have you in their corner. And so yeah, I continue to love our friendship and all of those hours that we spent together. And I thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for being so kind with your words. And it means the world to me that you would share that in the way that you have.
Thank you. So guys, make sure that you stay tuned. We're going to go over an episode recap. And then as always, we'll have a worksheet for you so that you can put some of these concepts into action for yourself. And of course, we'll have links to all of the things Sam mentioned for you. So stay tuned for that in a moment. Well, folks, that's it for today's podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on Women Who Rise, the success podcast for ambitious women. Today, Sam taught us about several things, one of which was knowing your own inherent wisdom. Basically, the idea that there is a lot of thought bouncing around in our head all the time, but at our heart, at our core, I would say, there is inherent wisdom that when you can get clarity, you can actually hear it. And there may be a lot of thought or a lot of habits or a lot of other things that are influencing that or getting in the way. And so his coaching really does, and his podcast really does seek to clarify for people so that you can hear the wisdom that is inside of you. Number two, learning to tap into who you really are and understanding that the past and future are not determinant of who you are and can be today. He mentioned that you are where your hands are. Your hands cannot reach into the past. Your hands cannot reach into the future. They do not exist. What you have is today. And that also means that any thought about the past or any worry or concern about the future is only a thought generated thing. It just doesn't exist. And the freedom around kind of understanding that and learning how to discern the two things as they're running through your head, your inspiration, the present, today, I'm here right now, versus, oh my gosh, I have all these, thoughts around, I can't do this because of that, or what if I do this, this will happen. All of that is just generated in your own mind. And that means that it can be set aside and you can go forth with whatever you want or need to do today more powerfully, and just recognize that your mind is very innocently trying to help and protect you, but that it is just a whole lot of thought. Number three, knowing that we are all, the whole world, psychologically safe to feel your feelings, to allow your feelings to move through you, to be able to feel them rather than stuffing them down. The feelings themselves and the feeling of those feelings cannot harm you, that you are psychologically safe. There's protection mechanisms, and we talk about that on the episode, that your brain is innocently thinking, hey, don't go down that dark alley, be careful, whatever, that's developed over millennia. But now we mistake that for things like being sad will harm us, or being sad is something we should desperately avoid, when in fact, being sad is something we're perfectly capable to feel and have it move through us. And by sticking it down, we do not gain anything. We can actually lose a lot from some chronic issues. So, and then, next, fourth, really, we talked about women being a nurturing person it doesn't mean you can't have it all. And really thinking about erasing those thoughts or guilt, again, thoughts around, being able to go for your own dreams. And, all this idea of society needs me to do this, my kids need me to do that, et cetera. It doesn't mean that you don't genuinely need to care for people. This is, this may be a core component of you being a mom or just a female in your society. But it's also this idea that you should feel guilty or wrong if you pursue your own goals, or that somehow that's, not, fair for you to do or whatever. These are, again, thoughts. As unhelpful and as normal as they may feel, they are unhelpful to you pursuing your dreams. So yeah, just an amazing episode. It certainly is one of the longest I have recorded, but I don't want to cut any of that wisdom for you. And so please take a look at the study guide as well. Visit our website to find our episode guide and our worksheet that will help you use these tips to take action in your own life. From this episode in particular, I think you're going to find a lot of incredible takeaways that if you take a few minutes to journal around, you're going to really get some incredible aha moments for yourself. And then please like and subscribe and join us everywhere podcasts are streamed. We can't wait to bring you more incredible content every week so that you can rise in your own lives and careers. Again, thank you so much. Heather Mansy, signing off.